everybody. For those of you that don't know me, my name's Tim Millgate. I'm the Democratic Services Officer, and as this is the first meeting of the Audit Committee for the 25-26 municipal year, it's down to myself to open proceedings until we elect a chair for the new municipal year. So item 1, evacuation procedure. In the event of a fire, please await direction from staff members who will help assist with the evacuation. Please do not return to the building until instructed to do so by the fire wardens. Item 2, welcome and apologies for absence. We have received apologies for absence from Councillor Addison, from Councillor Clark, and from Councillor Leach. Councillor Anne Morgan is attending as Councillor Leach's substitute. Just a reminder also that the committee has 3 independent members who have full voting rights on the committee. Councillor Williams has informed me that he has an appointment and he will join the meeting around 11:15. Item 3 is the election of chair for the municipal year 2025-26. Do we have any nominations? Councillor Simon.
I nominate Councillor Wilcox.
Okay, there's a nomination for Councillor Wilcox from Councillor Simon. Is that seconded? That's seconded by Councillor Hucker. Do we have any further nominations for chair? In that case, can I see a show of hands for the election of Councillor Wilcox as chair? Okay, and that's passed unanimously, Councillor Wilcox. So I'll just swap places for Councillor Wilcox so he can chair the rest of the meeting.
Thank you, everyone, for that endorsement. Before we go on to the nominations for vice chair, should we do a round of introductions so that we know who we are, please? My name's Councillor David Wilcox from Localism ward in Bristol. Should we go councillors and then we'll do officers?
Thank you, Chair. Councillor Jonathan Hucker, Stopwood ward, Bristol.
Councillor Toby Simon, Bathwick ward in Bath. And North East Somerset, sorry.
Councillor Adrian Rush, Chipping Sobring, Cotswold Edge, South Gloucestershire.
Councillor Anne Morgan, Ward Councillor for High Littleton Baines.
Tom Blenkinsop, Councillor for Avonmouth and Lawrence Weston, Bristol.
Good morning, Councillor Ben Burton, Ward Councillor for French End Down End in South Gloucestershire.
Morning, Mark Hatcliffe, independent member.
Hi, Jennifer Whitten, independent member.
Hello, Christine Fraser, independent member.
Good morning, committee. Pete Barber, director with Grant Thornton, West of England Combined Authorities, external auditor.
Good morning, everyone. My name's Tarek. I'm from Internal Audit.
Good morning all, Steve Finnegan, Financial Accountant, Mayoral Combined Authority.
Morning, James Kinane-Nealon, Head of Finance at the West of England Combined Authority.
Hello, you've already heard from me, but Tim Millgate, Democratic Services.
I'm Solange Russell, I'm the Director of Finance, Investments and Commercial at the West of England Combined Authority.
Morning everyone, I'm Bob Brown and I'm the Director of Law and Governance.
Councillor Shabalala.
I'm Councillor Shabalala, Bristol.
Thank you. Now we can move on to nominations and election for the vice chair. Do we have any nominations, please?
I'd like to nominate Councillor Toby Simon as Vice Chair.
Thank you. And I will second that. Thank you very much. So a round of show of hands to actually elect Councillor Simon. Thank you, that's unanimous. Do we have any declarations of interest, please? Councillor Simon.
I should put on record that I chair the Avon Pension Fund, and the pension fund gets mentioned in accounting documents as well. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Now I'd like to move on to item 6, which is the minutes of the previous meeting. To consider and approve the minutes from the meeting of the West of England Combined Authority Audit Committee held on the 3rd of March. Does anybody have any comments? But for accuracy, yes. Is the committee content to agree the set of minutes as a true record of that meeting? Can I have a verbal responder, please?
Happy to confirm that verbally. Do we want to do it to true and accurate record and then matters arising, or should we do it all at once?
There is no matters arising.
Yeah, we'll do matters arising afterwards. Yeah.
Okay, but it's a true and accurate record of accounts. Yes, that. Yeah.
Oh, okay. Right. Okay. Sorry about that, Tom. Item 7, which is the terms of reference. Members are asked to note the committee's terms of reference on pages 17 to 18 of the big pack. Councillor Tibishala.
Yeah, I think beyond noting, it's I'd like to see a bit more about the measurements of the audit. So what is the performance framework that we're actually working towards? Because it's one thing to provide audit function, but without really understanding what the priorities are, the performance framework, then we kind of working in the blind. So I'd like to see if that could be an amendment within the terms of reference.
Thank you for that. Yes, I do agree. I've noticed that our terms of reference is less than 1 page, and Bristol City Council's terms of reference is over 3 pages. So I would like to convene a working group to actually redefine them and actually make them a bit more useful for us. And Bob Brown.
Chair, the Constitution is being reviewed and the terms of references of committees and other matters are being reconsidered as members will be aware. So there is an opportunity to pick that up as we go forward. I mean, it could be done as a separate item for yourselves anyway, but that wider constitutional review is being undertaken. So there's an opportunity to pick that up as well.
Councillor Simon?
Yes, I think we should look at the terms of reference as part of the constitutional review. I think that's a good way of doing it. There are model terms of reference, I understand, published by SIPFA, but since they're an expensive SIPFA document, I haven't been able to look at them, but somebody may have access to that. And I think that those model terms of reference should be the starting point.
Between James and I, we'll see if we can access through the SIPFA. Right?
Thank you. And they'll be distributed to members of the committee so that we can look at them. Lovely. Thank you. So do we consider this item noted? Excellent. Thank you. Now we move on to item 8, which is items from the public. There were 4 questions received in advance of the meeting and responses have been circulated and published. We received 5 statements Those statements have also been published and circulated, and the following persons have indicated they wish to address the meeting on the topic of their statements. The time limit is 3 minutes per person. And Suzanne, you are first on the list.
Thank you. I think we're all hoping for a more positive phase now in the West of England Combined Authority. I think we're all hopeful for that. But the accounts for last year, obviously, is what you'll be dealing with. And I think there are issues that need to be highlighted. A contract awarded to Sieves Consultancy Limited cost the Combined Authority £150,000 for 9 months, July 24 to March 25. Despite freedom of information requests, there hasn't been a proper explanation of the procurement process. Questions at overview and scrutiny on the 14th of July didn't result in an explanation of that process either. But the Chief Executive made a statement indicating that 2 contracts breached the Combined Authority's internal procurement process. And I reproduced that for you, but I'm not going to read it out now. If the aim of the statement was to really clear this up, I'm afraid it hasn't. The Chief Exec seemed to blame officers who've now left the organisation, but I wonder if that's fair when both he and the Assistant Chief Executive were closely involved. Do they accept any responsibility at all? For some members of the public, one concern was whether the abolished Bristol Mayor's Office was effectively being recreated at the West of England Mayoral Combined Authority. In terms of transparency, what process was followed to award these contracts? Was the internal auditor informed about the breaches of procurement rules? Were members of the audit committee informed as soon as possible? How will these breaches be reflected in the reports of the internal and the external auditors? And in terms of value for money, how was this assessed and by whom? You'll have seen that the cost of the Sieves consultancy was really high for the Mayoral Combined Authority when compared with that for the Police and Crime Commissioner. There's a statement outlining that, and it's detailed. You can find the evidence in FOIs. So I hope the Audit Committee will ask pertinent questions about this and actually receive some clear answers. Thank you.
Thank you, Suzanne. And Mr. Edgewell, you're next on the list.
So also on the theme of procurement, we're concerned about the purchase of buses. Another purchase of buses went through the Joint Committee on Friday, but £50 million came from First Group and £9 million from the Combined Authority. This was to purchase electric buses, which are fine for the City of Bristol, for Hengrove Bus Garage, and for Western Supermere in North Somerset. It appears that the contract went to one provider, a Chinese company, Pelican and Wontong, but I can't see any evidence of this going out to tender for Wright or for Alexander Dennis in the way the Manchester Authority and Transport for London have done so. So we're just wondering what the procurement structure was for that public money and how it was put through, or was it just handed to First Group, and was there a public procurement exercise at all? And there's further buses being commissioned and purchased by this authority under the Bus Service Improvement Plan and the Zebra bid too. But we're still no clearer how these buses are being commissioned, purchased, or being acquired, or are they going through public procurement? Now, I say this because we went through the hydrogen buses that were purchased previously by South Gloucestershire Council with First Group PLC, and they went through full public procurement, and they were purchased in a joint arrangement with the hydrogen and there's also infrastructure money being spent at Lawrence Hill Bus Garage and at Hengrove. I don't know how much that money is. That's public money from this authority, how it's being controlled and how it's being financed. So that's the first issue. It's the Transport Authority. It's spending large sums of public money. That's its major function in law. So the next patient we're interested in, same as Councillor Weston, and there's no politics in this, We started a procurement for Henbury Railway Station in 2021. Just recently, that procurement's continued. We've had delays on a project through flooding. We've had delays on no planning permission. And this is supposed to be a priority of Mere Helen. But we have, as we speak here today, there's still no planning procurement. This is one of the most basic stations to build, piece of track and a basic station. And we also need to have the disabled access being provided. The buses, I stress, only have one wheelchair space. The previous procurement had two. So it is a lot of concern about this, and also infrastructure around buses and public transport, and about how Bristol City Council seem to duplicate efforts of public money when it comes to bus infrastructure, notices and staff. It's not clear, even though I appreciate, as my colleague here said, behind us better working together. But this is public money, and it's not procured in the same way as Liverpool City Region, Greater Manchester, or the other combined, even the new one in East Midlands. Thank you.
Thank you, Dave Redroll. So now we move on to item 9, which is the report back from the main committee and the chair's announcements. So I would like to welcome Councillors Tibishala and Clark to the Audit Committee. Welcome. And I'd like to note that I did attend the full committee last Friday and gave an update on the items on today's agenda. Please watch the YouTube recording of the public forum and the committee business to get the full background of that meeting. This committee can be a word salad of acronyms. To help the meeting flow, if people use an acronym, can they please explain what it stands for? But I'll make a start with a couple of these. WECA, which obviously stands for the West of England Combined Authority. And there's another spin on that, which is the MCA, which is the Mayoral Combined Authority, which is made up of unitary authorities, or UAs, Bristol, Baines, and which is Bath and North East Somerset, to use an acronym of itself, and South Gloss. A couple of the other ones that will appear in this meeting is MHCLG, which is the Ministry of Housing, Communities and also Local Government. Then there's CRSTS, which is the City Regional Sustainable Transport Settlement. Someone in Westminster thought this was obviously a bit of a mouthful, and thankfully they've renamed it CRSTS TCR, which stands for Transport for City Regions. So we can all be up to date on our acronyms. Now I'd like to move on to item 10, unless there are any questions, which is the Audit Committee Forward Work Plan. And Solange will be speaking to that, please.
Okay, so I'll introduce this one. So this is a standard rolling forward work plan, which outlines a schedule of reports to be presented to Audit Committee at each of its meetings during the next year. So just please note that certain reports have to be presented at identified meetings in order to comply with statutory requirements. So the Audit Committee is asked to review and comment on the forward plan, propose any changes or make recommendations for items to be added or changed accordingly.
Thank you. Do we have any questions on the work plan, please? Councillor Simon.
Chair, I haven't discussed this with you, but I'm wondering whether we need a standing item on the agenda for matters of concern to members that allow us to raise and discuss issues either presented by the public or picked up by us in other contexts, rather than trying to find a hook to put them on in the papers that are before us. I think an open discussion in the committee. I note that a colleague wanted to raise a matter arising, and that wasn't an option. So I think a matters of concern to members item would be a helpful addition to the agenda.
I have a feeling the Director of Legal Services wants to come in on this.
Yeah, I mean, these are formal meetings, that the agenda and the items that need to be discussed need to be advertised so people can attend and understand what's going to be on the matter. There is an opportunity for the chair to set items to go onto the agenda with proper notification. So there is a process by which items can come onto the agenda. I think that's the appropriate way to deal with it. An open, let's discuss anything matter, I think, would not be appropriate for a public open meeting where people should know what's going to be brought before them, and officers and others can prepare appropriately.
Can I suggest a small compromise in that case? At the very end of this meeting, we have a section where we bring matters arising to the full committee. Can we also have a section for suggested items for the next meeting in there, please? Does that work?
That's this one. So maybe it's the timing of this forward work plan. Maybe we should just move this to the end of the meeting, where you've had the discussion throughout the meeting, and then we can see what items you'd like to be added to the forward work plan.
Yeah, that works.
I think that's the appropriate way forward.
Okay, so next time the work plan will come at the very end.
Yeah.
Okay, I think that's a good compromise. Thank you. So we are requested to review the forward work plan and suggest any amendments required. Does anybody want to bring any amendments?
Thank you, Chair. Yes, I wonder if we should have an opportunity during a formal meeting to comment on the draft statement of accounts. We, of course, have had a briefing from officers on the draft statement of accounts, which was very helpful, I must say. And that briefing did highlight some of the salient points, but we don't appear to have an opportunity to actually comment or raise questions in a formal setting.
Montel?
I think if I understand the process, that it'll come here to be approved. So therefore, they won't be finalised until you've considered them here formally.
Yes, we as the audit committee do approve the accounts once they've been audited. But I wonder if we should have the opportunity to raise issues whilst the audit is actually in process.
Councillor Simon?
Chair, we do have an item on the agenda for a verbal update on the progress of the unaudited statement. So if colleagues have queries about things that should have been in the draft and weren't, or need further attention by the auditors, perhaps that's a peg to hang that on.
That sounds an excellent way of doing it. Are you happy with that, Jonathan? Excellent, thank you. Any more amendments? Oh, answer to. Yeah.
Jennifer.
Can't see the name.
Hidden at the back here.
Could you speak into the microphone, please?
Yep, sorry. I'm sitting at the back here. On a couple of other committees that I sit on, like this relates back to our terms of references as well. The committees consider policies as they're being updated, relevant financial policies as they're being updated throughout the organization, things like the fraud and corruption policies, whistleblowing, etc. And I'm wondering if that's part of our terms of reference here, and if so, if we could sort of consider any updates that are being made, you know, if you review them 3 yearly, for example, when there are relevant updates, that they would come to this committee as well.
Thank you, Jennifer. I think that's been noted.
Yeah.
Agreed. Councillor Tubshala?
Chair, I wonder if it's possible to really think about the performance framework and the priorities of our elected mayor, that this becomes an agenda to really have the opportunity to really think about what are the priorities and how do they fit in. If that's an agenda that could be put here, so we have a specific time to really look at the performance framework.
So you would like us to add the performance framework?
Yes, so we can better understand how that performance framework aligns with the things that we are viewing as part of audit. If they are the core priorities that we'd like to see, or if they're not the core priorities that we'd like to see, and how we can shape or influence that performance framework. I think that would be quite beneficial.
I agree. Are we measuring the right things?
Absolutely. My other point, Chair, is that it's really good to see the social value. But in hindsight, this has been existing for quite some time, and it is part of procurement, but it's not always the core part that's addressed within procurement. It's always just the spend. I wonder if it would be useful to actually get a brief of the previous social value outcomes or performances through past contracts to better understand what we do for the future contracts and what that framework would be, so that we better understand what's the economic benefit for all of the spend within the combined authority.
Thank you for that. And is that going on an action tracker? Thank you very much. Any more suggestions?
I've got one more I can put in your sleeve. So when we're looking at the actual spend, there's potentially one that is not ring fenced as yet, which is the shared prosperity fund. Seeing that a number of the items that we'll be going through today have all got some sort of risk around project management. And so would it be better to really just have a view of something that is currently unallocated to understand what does best, performance look like through something that can be still bespoke?
That's an excellent idea. Yes, I think we can incorporate that.
So can I just check, would you be looking at that from a risk point of view, controls or governance?
Yes, all of that. On the basis that it's currently unallocated, it gives us an opportunity to have something that we can pilot to see, this is where we started, these are the outcomes, this is the performance framework. And, as Audit has been involved from the beginning, what does the end look like? And therefore, we can see the difference of past programs and we can kind of evaluate that. Thanks.
Can I also add to that some sort of benchmarking with other mayoral combined authorities to make sure that we're performing in a similar fashion to other areas?
So benchmarking from what perspective?
The performance items that we're looking at. Okay. Are we doing the same or better or worse than other mayoral combined authorities? So I think we've reviewed that. Shall we move on to the item 11, which is the audit plan for the West of England Combined Authority year ending 31st of March 2025. And as compiled by the authority's external auditors, Grant Thornton. You want to go ahead?
Thank you, Chair. Good morning again, committee. So, as the Chair outlined, this is our audit plan for the Combined Authority for the financial year 24-25, and it sets out our approach to discharging. Can you hear me now? Is that better? Yeah, I'll move it closer. So I'll just recap for those of you that didn't hear me. So this is our plan for the Combined Authority that sets out our approach to discharging our responsibilities as your external auditors for 2024-25. Just to remind this committee that our responsibilities are twofold. Firstly, it's to give an opinion on your financial statements. And secondly, it's to issue what we call our value for money conclusion, assessing whether in our view you do or do not have arrangements in place for delivering value for money. Now, audit, and in particular external audit, is a retrospective exercise, so it's predominantly done after the year end. You will be aware that the 24-25 year is concluded. This plan was produced based on work undertaken in the early part of the calendar year and issued to officers back in April. But given the recent elections, this was the first meeting of this committee that the paper could be brought to. But I am aware that this report was shared with members for information back in May. So just to give you the latest position on where we are on each of our two responsibilities, if we start with the opinion first, pleased to be able to report that we do now have a set of draft 24-25 financial statements from the Combined Authority. They were published a couple of days late, and whilst it wasn't an issue with the numbers, it was more to do with accessibility that delayed that slightly. But we are now progressing with that post-statements work. The most efficient way for us to gain assurance over the material accuracy of those accounts is what we call a substantive audit, which is what essentially where we wait for the draft accounts to be produced and we check the numbers, we get breakdowns of those numbers, and we test them to make sure that they are properly reflected in the accounts. The deadline for the sign off of those accounts is the end of February next year, February 2026. But as you will see in our plan, we are working to an earlier deadline. We have prioritised again this year the combined authority, and it is within our phase 1 audits, which means it's underway already. And we are hoping to complete the bulk of the work by the end of September. Realistically, I won't be able to sign until probably October at the earliest, because amongst other things, I am reliant on getting a letter of assurance from the auditors of Avon Pension Fund in relation to your pension numbers, and that invariably doesn't arrive with me until October. But nonetheless, October would be a very good outcome for the audit this year, and we will continue to work with finance officers to deliver to that deadline. When I do come to sign, and hopefully that opinion will be a clean opinion, what we call an unqualified opinion, I don't sign off to say they're correct to the pound. I work to a materiality figure, and you'll see in this draft plan that the materiality at the planning stage for the combined authority has been set at just over 4 million, 4.1 million. The accounts are very long, and they seem to get longer every year across the public sector. So the accounts run to 130 plus pages. As auditors, we check all the information in those 130 plus pages, but as you would expect, we prioritize. So we undertake additional audit procedures on any numbers in the primary statements above that £4.1 million materiality, and they are subject to additional enhanced audit procedures. And then we have what we call our significant risks, and these are the areas where we spend the majority of our time. The first one of these is outlined on page 41 of your pack, which is management override of control. This is a significant risk that would appear across the sector, and for that matter, across all sectors. And it really focuses on those areas of the accounts that are most susceptible to misreporting through estimate and judgment. And a particular area of focus is journals. So journals, should an organisation wish to do so, journals are a really effective way of moving monies between cost centres, accounts, financial years. And we are particularly interested in journals. We get a full download from the system. We cut it using some software that we have to assess risk, and we pick out journals for testing. But we do also look at those wider areas of the accounts that are subject to estimation and judgment to make sure there's no management bias in adjusting those numbers to create a desired outcome. The second significant risk that we have in the plan again this year is the valuation of the pension liability. So you have a pension disclosure in your balance sheet, and that is based on an assessment by the actuaries for the Avon Pension Fund of your share of the assets held in Avon Pension Fund and your share of the liabilities and the resulting net position. It requires an awful lot of estimation and judgment, and therefore we are particularly interested in how that figure has been arrived at. And as I alluded to earlier, one of the things we do, amongst others, is get letters of assurance from the auditors of Avon Pension Fund. Grant Thornton, a colleague of mine, are also the auditors for the Avon Pension Fund, so we liaise with them and we seek a letter from them confirming, amongst other things, accuracy of data, application of the actuaries' assumptions, etc. So those are the two main significant risks, and they're absolutely consistent with prior years. You'll note also that on page 45, we have a new other risk this year, which is a risk that I suspect most auditors are highlighting across the public sector, which is in relation to IFRS 16, which is right of use assets, essentially leases, and where the combined authority has lease arrangements, either as the lessor or the lessee, whether those, for all intents and purposes, are and should be considered under IFRS 16 as an asset at the top of the balance sheet with the corresponding liability at the bottom of the balance sheet. It's fair to say that you have a less complex arrangement with your lessors and lessees than most local government bodies, but we do note that there are some material figures in your accounts this year in relation to that IFRS 16 disclosure, and we will obviously be testing that in some detail. That is the main approach in relation to the opinion. I'll now go on to value for money. And value for money is an additional responsibility that only appears within the public sector. So if you're in the private sector and the auditors are coming in to audit a private company, they're purely interested in the accounts. They're purely interested in the numbers in those accounts being correct, the transactions in year and the position at year end. They're not interested on how efficiently and effectively and how much that delivered, that spend. They are purely interested in that they are factually accurate. We have this second responsibility, value for money. And value for money means lots of things to lots of people, but it's based on the NAO code. And the NAO code specifies 3 areas for attention: financial sustainability, where you set your budget, you monitor it, you look at variations, you take corrective action, how you report year end, how you're monitoring it during the year; medium-term financial planning, planning into the medium term to deliver efficiencies, investing up front. We're interested in governance, and clearly this committee is those charged with governance. So that is your role on this committee, to ensure there is effective governance in place within the combined authority. So we are particularly interested in governance arrangements, ensuring decisions are based on complete, accurate and timely information. And then the third area we're interested in is the 3 E's: economy, efficiency and effectiveness. How are you delivering those services? Are you delivering them in an efficient way? Are they effective? Is it economically sound? All those areas we look at. We look at all 3 of those areas, and we provide narrative and commentary and judgment in each of those areas. But as you would expect, we focus on the areas that we consider to be the riskiest in terms of poor arrangements. And then that risk assessment is constantly updated. So when we did do this plan, if we look at page 38, you'll see a few bullet points there on the right-hand side, where we talk about some areas of particular focus, which will be in terms of governance, because I think financial sustainability, you have quite a healthy balance sheet. There may be a wider issue about how effectively and quickly you deliver some of your programs. But clearly, from a financial point of view, we are pretty comfortable. We will absolutely be doing lots of further work this year, but we're comfortable. Governance will be a real area of focus, and that really stems from some of the prior year recommendations that have been made. There's the partner relationships, the program governance, and the leadership culture. We will be once again looking at this. We are also once again looking at program management and really the major transport infrastructure projects and how those are being delivered in a timely and effective manner. And we'll also be looking at this year as well the turnover of senior officers and the associate value for money associated with their departures. We are aware that obviously the best value notice has now expired, but we recognise that within that communication to the combined authority, there was clear reference for the need to ensure that the reported improvements to date are fully embedded and sustained, and further work will be undertaken to assess that progress and where you currently are and what you still need to do. And those value for money conclusions will be reported in a separate auditor's annual report that we will bring to a later meeting of this committee, potentially within the next 3 or 4 months. That work on VFM commenced over a month ago and is well progressed and continues. So the only other thing, Chair, I probably want to mention is the fees. So page 69 sets out the indicative fees for the current year based on public sector audits appointments scale fee of just over £134,000. You'll note that there is potentially an additional fee for the IFRS 16, but that will be informed by how much work, if any, we need to do, and considered alongside the totality of our audit time to discharge our responsibilities when we report to you later in the year. I'll stop there, Chair, but I'm happy to take any questions on the detail.
Thank you, Peter, for a very full report. Who would like to open the questions? Councillor Hucker.
Thank you, Peter. Yeah, I'd just like to ask a question around IFRS 16. In your comprehensive presentation, you mentioned that the adoption of IFRS 16 would have a material impact on the financial statements. Now, I wouldn't have thought that the authority would have many operating leases other than this building. So I just wondered if you could expand on that. Is that material impact on the, I presume it would be on the balance sheet rather than the income and expenditure statement, because I'm assuming that the impact would be on recognising fixed assets in the balance sheet and a corresponding lease liability, as opposed to any material impact on the income and expenditure account. Is that correct?
Yeah, thank you for that question. So I've reviewed the draft accounts, and maybe my recollection is failing me. I must admit, I thought there was about just over 4 million of adjustments to the balance sheet as a result of those. But I'm looking at Solange in her capacity as from the finance perspective, and maybe it's not material. But one of the risks that we do face across the sector is completeness. So irrespective of the amount in the accounts, we will be absolutely looking to gain assurance from all local government bodies, given this is first year implementation, including the combined authority, from a completeness point of view, that all leases have been identified, assessed, and considered in relation to IFRS 16, and if necessarily, properly valued and reflected in those draft accounts. But I defer to finance officers if my initial statement that it might be material was wrong. Irrespective of that, just for the benefit of members, this area will be looked at in detail, irrespective of the amount, because obviously there's always that completeness risk that there isn't a disclosure in there that should be. But I also recognise that we can be proportionate here, because in terms of those lease arrangements, as I said, they're very much less involved than lots of local government bodies that have huge amounts of leases that require huge amounts of consideration in relation to this new standard.
So yes, so ours is, we've got this building and I think one other, Steve. Yeah, Davis House. So very small.
And so basically the impact would be on the presentation of the balance sheet as opposed to any sort of charge to the income and expenditure account in a material sense.
Yes, the charge that will be actually going to the INE in year for 24-25, and then the future years is depreciating down that right of use asset.
Thank you.
Any more questions? Councillor Simon?
Thank you. I'm looking at the materiality criteria on page 50 of the pack. And the materiality is lower for officers' remuneration, which is clearly right. I would hope that officers' remuneration should include contracts for personal services for people filling senior roles in the authority, as well as for direct payroll payments.
So the code is very clear on what should and should not be included in the senior officer disclosures within the financial statements, and we will be looking to ensure that all senior officers are properly disclosed in accordance with the Code of Audit Practice, and the elements of their remuneration that is required to be disclosed by type. So that will be subject to a detailed test. There will be 100% sample on that, including completeness, given the numbers involved and the sensitivities.
And will that will include self-employment type contracts as well as employment type contracts?
It will include consideration of whether the combined authority has appropriately applied the Code of Audit Practice requirements in terms of the nature of that appointment.
And will it also include the procurement aspects of those contracts?
Well, that would depend on whether that procurement arrangement fell within the requirements of the code in terms of those disclosures on that particular note.
Okay, I flagged it up.
Thank you, Councillor Simon. Mr. Hatcliffe.
Thank you. Thank you, Peter. Great update and presentation. So thank you. The value for money aspect that you mentioned about the efficiency, effectiveness and the economy, just interested in how those items are going to be shown and demonstrated. Will they be demonstrated individually of the 3 E's, or will it be RAG rated? Will there be commentary on them? Will it be on the 1 to 10 scale? Just so we can form an opinion on how that will look, really.
Yeah, absolutely. So we are changing our reporting style slightly this year. So I did mention in my presentation that the value for money work is focused on the NAO code and the 3 areas. So within, and apologies because I know the chair mentioned acronyms earlier, but they do have an AGN 03 that they produced, the NAO Audit Governance Audit Guidance Notes 3, which sets out in detail each of those 3 areas. So within the 3 E's criteria, there are a number of sub areas that we're required to look at. So I think there's probably 6 or 7 of those. And what we will do within our report is for each of those 6 or 7 areas, we will provide a narrative and a RAG rating.
Yeah, okay.
And obviously, if you're in the reds,
yeah,
then that's a concern for the combined authority for this committee. And it means that in our view, you don't have effective arrangements in place. If it's an amber, it tends to mean that you're doing okay, but there's room for improvement, and here's some recommendations. And green is the all clear. So that 3E section will have a number of sections with explicit narrative on our judgment for the year in question. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Hatcliffe. Councillor Burton.
Thank you, Chair. Just returning to the value for money in the office remuneration and disclosure. Obviously, I can see the details here in terms of what you'd expect to see in terms of that disclosure and how those tests will be applied. Will we, though, get any sense of benchmarking of either the remuneration and any severance payments, given the historic significant sums that have been spent on severance payments to this authority? Will we have any benchmark figures to see what you would expect either of a combined authority like ourselves or in the private place of a similar size organisation in terms of the level of those remuneration for the senior officers and also for the severance payments you'd likely to see? Because of course, without that benchmark or determination, it'd be hard to determine whether what we're seeing is usual in-year trends for that sort of turnover, or whether it's something which is exceptional, like which in my view we've seen previously.
So we absolutely will not be doing any benchmarking comparisons of any salaries paid to individual positions. That's not something the auditor does. And clearly, every organisation has its own circumstances and skill sets for those positions and market conditions that organisation needs to take into consideration in setting those salaries. In terms of the exit packages, the settlements, whatever terminology you wish to use, once again, we will be looking to ensure that the decision has been made in accordance with policy within the Constitution and followed due process, and proper advice has been sought where appropriate. And clearly, in terms of the amount of monies paid, we would be checking to ensure that is consistent with the contract in place. And if there is any enhanced payments, the basis of those and the business case to understand why that was deemed appropriate and in the wider interest of the combined authority.
Sorry, I'll pull this closer. I've got a similar question just around benchmarking and in relation to governance. If you're looking at effectiveness and efficiency, will you be looking at any of the other combined authorities just to compare governance structures?
No, we won't. But clearly, every combined authority will have their own external auditor who will be looking at the governance arrangements within that organisation, and it will be for that auditor of that organisation to report on their views on governance. Clearly, every combined authority is different and faces its unique challenges, but there is some commonality as well. And just as we say within upper tier councils, unitaries, districts, whatever it may be, police authorities, fire authorities, there is always learning to be had and best practice to be shared within a particular sector. But we would not be commenting on how the governance arrangements at West of England Combined Authority compare with other combined authorities. We would be making our judgments in relation to your arrangements.
Thank you. Councillor Tibshala.
Thanks, Chair. There is an evaluation tool set by government. What's it called? Magneto book, which is the government's guidance for evaluation. Now, I wonder if we can adopt something that's already set there by government in terms of it's MAGENTA book. That's the handbook that they use to evaluate governments. Manchester's got currently that. And what that does is it really helps with cost-benefit analysis, both for internal and also for the public. I wonder if that's the methodology and the framework that we could use, because it's already set there. And it is something that's already adopted by other combined authority, so that we then have a framework to compare what is happening across other combined authority and where we stand. And seeing that this is a government toolkit, I would hope that this is the kind of framework that we could adopt alongside with any other bespoke approaches, but it sets a precedence that is nationally recognized. Would that be an approach that we would take?
I'm not sure this relates specifically to external audit, your point. I think that's probably more one aligned to performance management, I think.
Yeah, I think it's both, either, because internal audit will influence external audit. So maybe this is a question for internal audit, but it is something that, as a combined authority, this is what is being used by other combined authorities. If we're looking for, matching apples with apples, this could be that framework that we use. Yeah, I'd like your thoughts on it anyway.
Yeah, so as part of this year's work, we do have a piece of work on performance management, and it's perhaps something we can pick up as part of that work.
Jennifer?
Thanks. Just a short question for me. In the IT audit strategy on page 56, so you highlight in your ITGC assessment that you're considering the design effectiveness only. I was curious as to why it's not design and implementation for the finance systems.
So in undertaking an audit, auditors can adopt a number of strategies. Many will adopt what they call a controls and substantive audit approach, which means they seek to place reliance on the controls within a financial system and walk it through and check it to ensure it's working as intended. And that then enables them to reduce the amount of substantive testing they do at year end. Our experience over many years is that the most efficient way to gain assurance over your financial statements is a purely substantive one. We are required to consider IT and factor that into our risk assessment. So it is the design and effectiveness that we're interested in isolation. The further work would be required if we were looking to place reliance on controls, which we are not looking to do.
Thank you. I have one more point of clarification I'd like to raise. On page 41, you talk about the management override of controls. To what level do procurement decisions come under the management override of controls, please?
Well, when we're talking about management override of controls, we are looking at management override of controls that may impact on the financial information within the organisation that's reported, so the accounts themselves. So is there any management override of those controls to deliver a desired financial outcome? So if you are an organisation that is struggling to to deliver a balanced position, return of profit. There is a enhanced risk of management under reporting provisions, for example, moving monies between financial years or delaying payment into the following year. That is the management override of control that we are looking at and looking for through our substantive testing to ensure that is not taking place. And if it is, to quantify it and do further work to understand the extent of that and what that might mean for our opinion. So the procurement issue is separate, and it really is that is more to do with the way that the organisation works and operates and procures its services, and would be of more interest within our value for money if we deemed it to be a risk.
Thank you for that clarification. Any more questions? Councillor Hucker. And we must bear in mind it's 11:30 already.
Yes. Sorry, Chair. This is it's just a very quick one, actually, which has occurred to me. It's a question on I realise that you were talking about the process, but having looked at the draft accounts, it's apparent that there's surplus on the provision of services of 12 million. But within that, net interest income is 21 million. And of course, net interest income is something which would be temporary, whilst the authority has cash surpluses, which indicates that there's an underlying deficit of 9 million. So does this raise any concerns about the financial sustainability of the authority?
So that is something we would look at in terms of value for money under financial sustainability. In terms of the inherent risk, in our view, of deliberate misreporting by officers to achieve a desired outcome, given the position and those funds that you currently hold that are giving significant returns, we think that risk is comparatively low, but our testing on the accounts will look for any misreporting, deliberate or otherwise, and what that means in terms of any further testing where appropriate. In terms of the financial health, clearly that is why it's so important that this organisation has a medium-term financial plan, that it has a clear understanding of the cash flows in particular, of when monies comes in, because some funding is upfront, some of it is in stages, some of it is retrospective, and considering that alongside your ongoing revenue cost to understand what are the inflows and outflows and plan that into the medium term, and to ensure that whatever action is taken appropriately to ensure that you are comfortable that you can discharge your roles, because it may well be in some years that you are making these big surpluses within the comprehensive income and expenditure account. Others maybe not, because of the fact that you've built up balances in prior years. But also you have the added complication within local government where you have some of these adjustments that can impact significantly on the CEIS, the comprehensive income and expenditure account, things like the IAS 19 pension funds. You can have an organisation that actually on the Outturn report talks about hitting budget, but actually if you look at the CIS, it's overspent by 50 million purely because of a technical accounting change on the IAS 19. So there's lots of complexities in understanding what that CIS means, and it does need to be looked at, in my view, alongside the Outturn report and how that Outturn position compares with original budget.
Thank you. Shall I move that we've reviewed the Grant Thornton report? Everybody happy to do that? Great. Thank you very much. So we've reviewed it. The audit plan for the West of England Combined Authority for the year ending 31st of March 2025. So now I'd like to move on to item 12, which is the internal audit annual report, which is subtly different, I hope.
It is, yes. Good morning, all. Okay, so this is the annual report of the internal audit function covering the period April 2024 to March 2025, as well as the formal opinion on the internal control framework. Full detail is recorded in the report, and I will now provide a summary of the salient points. We asked the committee to note the internal audit report 24-25 and the formal opinion on the internal control framework. The committee approved the audit plan for 24-25 at the start of the financial year, and it is a significant source of assurance over the internal control environment. The committee last received update on delivery against the plan in December 2024, and this report builds upon that update, and the performance dashboard on page 3 of the report summarizes the year-end position. Appendix 1 provides an update on the position of the planned internal audit reviews, showing that the audit plan is complete based on final draft reports or the field work substantially completed. The performance dashboard shows that 88% of audits have been completed within the initial allocation of days. However, while individual audits may have exceeded the original allocation of days for the review to be completed, the overall internal audit plan has been delivered within the agreed total allocation. The performance dashboard records the implementation of agreed audit recommendations from audits completed in 23-24 at 100%. It is pleasing to report that the combined authority has implemented all recommendations that we made for 2 years in a row now, further strengthening the internal control framework. Looking at Appendix 1, the end of year position for 24-25, there were 12 completed audit reports, 4 received an assurance level 4 substantial assurance audit opinion, 4 received an assurance level 3 reasonable assurance audit opinion, and 2 received an assurance level 2 limited assurance audit opinion. The 2 limited assurance ratings related to the work completed on the starters, levers, and post changes, which was reported to the audit committee in December of last year. A follow-up of this audit has already been completed, and we are pleased to report that all recommendations have been implemented. The other limited assurance related to an unplanned piece of work on project management of mobility as a service, which was requested by the chief executive. The mobility as a service project aims to create an integrated platform where users can plan, book, and pay for bus journeys through a single application. For this piece of work, we identified 4 high-risk weaknesses, and the details for these are within the audit report. We are pleased to report that all recommendations for this piece of work were agreed by management, and that we will be following up on these as part of our cycle of internal audit work for 25-26. There were 3 pieces of unplanned work carried out in 24-25, 2 related to the mobility as a service application, and 1 related to a review of the MCA's involvement with the initial grant funding awarded to the community interest company Stepping Up. The outcome of the Stepping Up review has already been reported to the audit committee, and we will be following up on the recommendations that we have made for the 2 mobility as a service pieces of work as part of our cycle of work for 25-26. 1 audit, schemes of delegation, was deferred because this area will be reviewed as part of the organizational improvement plan, which is currently being developed. An external review of One West internal audit practices compared to public sector internal audit standards took place in late 2022, and the results were received in 2023. The review concluded the highest possible rating, which means that the internal audit service has a charter and policies and processes that are judged to be in full conformance with the public sector internal audit standards. The Institute of Internal Auditors has released new global internal audit standards, which became effective for local government in April 2025, and we have provided a briefing to the audit committee on these already. So that takes us to item 36, which is the formal opinion on the internal control framework. In terms of governance, it is pleasing to note that the best value notice issued by the Department of Levelling Up Housing Communities in March 2024 was not reissued in March 2025. The improvement plan developed and implemented by the combined authority during 24-25 is considered to have been instrumental in the decision not to reissue the notice in 2025. The bus service improvement plan and the city region sustainable transport scheme continue to remain areas of focus for the combined authority, and we have included targeted work on these areas in the 25-26 audit plan. Delivery of the annual audit plan did identify some internal control weaknesses, as would be expected, but none are deemed significant for inclusion in the opinion statement. And the opinion of the Chief Audit Executive is that the internal control framework and the systems in place to manage risk at the combined authority are reasonable. And finally, I'd like to thank the support of the Audit Committee for our work. That's everything. Happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Tarek. Councillor Hufker, Councillor Bleckenstock.
Thank you, Tarek. I see that the audit on procurement and commercial governance was given substantial assurance.
Yes.
So that that implies that there are fairly robust systems and controls around procurement. So it's all the more surprising that we're now aware that 2 contracts were entered into for which the authorities' procurement rules were not followed. I realise that you obviously don't test everything, and you test a sample of transactions when you conduct an internal audit. So I assume that that these particular transactions were not included in the sampling that you did.
Okay, so the piece of work that we did back in December 2024, they focused on the new procurement rules that were coming into play. So we looked at the governance over procurement for the new procurement regime that came into force, I think February 2024. At the time, we didn't do any detailed testing, and in the report, we do mention that we will be doing detailed testing as part of the follow-up, which is scheduled for 25-26. And as part of that, we can pick up on the 2 contracts that you mentioned to see where they fell down.
Thank you. I certainly think it's something that needs to be investigated thoroughly. In advance of that, I do have a question for the monitoring officer. Can you advise the committee at what level these transactions were authorised, and given that a breaches took place, was any disciplinary action taken?
I don't have any information to share on that with the committee. I'm afraid I haven't done any investigation into it myself.
Councillor Bleckenstock.
Thank you, and thank you, Tarek, for the report, which is generally very reassuring. I do have, after Councillor Hucker's intervention, I do have some questions on that myself, I think, but it would be good to know more about that in the not too distant future. Slightly smaller question is, we know that there's been no investigations or whistleblowing that internal audit have been involved with, which is reassuring. That's always good to hear. Just as a sort of asking or restating the obvious, we are confident in our whistleblowing processes. We're confident that if there was anything, there would have been channels for that to come through to us, and we're happy that we are in fact in the clear.
Oh, thank you. Yes, that's correct.
Mr. Hallett?
Tarek, just on the Appendix 1 areas under review, just the scheme of delegation, just wondering, is that delegation of powers within, just a little description of what that means, and is it still due? When is it due to be completed?
Yeah, so the schemes of delegation audit was deferred because the combined authority are doing a piece of work known as the Organisational Improvement Plan, and the schemes of delegation will be picked up as part of that work. We're also involved in that piece of work to provide an embedded assurance on that, so that will be picked up as part of the Organisational Improvement Plan.
Do we have a timescale for that? For the improvement plan?
I think the Organisational Improvement Plan, if I'm correct, is a 3-year. It's a 3-year plan, I'm not sure where along that timeline the schemes of delegation will be picked up.
Jennifer and yeah, Mark, can you switch your mic off?
Also on Appendix 1 in cybersecurity, so the status of that is blank. Was curious as to, is that still being planned for this year, or is it completed?
So the cybersecurity piece of work that has now been completed, and the assurance opinion for that was reasonable assurance. So for this year, we looked at cybersecurity training, and we made a few recommendations, but generally we found that the controls in place at the combined authority were reasonable.
Councillor Tipashala.
Thanks for that update. Just in terms of joining up the two audit reports, if you could help me on this. External audit is busy reviewing the governance, like partnerships, program oversight, and leadership and culture. An internal audit is overlooking at the control environment, but that's been evaluated as reasonable. Is that correct?
That's correct, yes,
Okay.
overall, based on our work.
Okay, so how does this reasonable assurance specifically reflect the areas of concern raised by external audit, and what kind of evidence do you have to justify that reassurance that is reasonable?
So our reasonable assurance audit opinion is based on the work that we've carried out, and the work we've carried out, even though we did find some weaknesses, none of them were deemed so significant that they would affect our audit opinion. If, for example, the best value notice hadn't been removed this year, that would have been something of concern. But this year, the best value notice was removed. So that gives us assurance that the combined authority has a good internal control environment. Then you also got to look at the other things the combined authority's got doing at the moment, like the organizational improvement plan that they put in place as a result of the best value notice.
And I guess this kind of continuously re-emphasizes the need for a performance framework, so we can see what reasonable is, what excellent is, and it gives us something that we're kind of aiming towards. Would you say having some sort of that framework would also help in terms of your audit?
So our work, we already provide an audit opinion in terms of whether it's something is reasonable or substantial. We do have a piece of work this year on performance management, and we can look at some of the things that you've raised as part of that work.
Thank you.
Thank you. So can I move that we have note this in the internal audit report? Are you happy to move on? Thank you very much. So I'd like to move on to item 13, which is an update on the unaudited draft statement of accounts, which will be a verbal update from Stephen again.
Thank you, Chair. It was to be a verbal update, but I think an awful lot of what I was going to say was covered earlier by Peter. And in fact, last week when we presented the draft accounts to committee members at the formal briefing. So I wonder if we use this opportunity to take any further questions on the draft accounts.
Certainly. Any questions? Not even from Councillor Hooker?
Did you ask already?
Just right, okay. I think we've cleared that one. Thank you, Steve. So as we move on to item 15, which is the Treasury Management Outturn. Sorry, update 14. Update on the National Fraud Initiative exercise, also from Steve.
Sure. Thank you again, Chair. Again, it's just a verbal update. The National Fraud Initiative is an exercise undertaken nationally every 2 years. As part of our ongoing commitment to fraud prevention, the MCA submitted the required data set to the Cabinet Office. These data sets were supplier and creditor data together with our payroll data for last year. The data sets were matched then nationally with other organisations to identify potential errors, duplicate payments, possible instances of fraud or irregularity. We've had our key results back, So we do have a number of matches with duplicate creditors by names and by addresses. We had one instance of a bank account identification which was matched. So I won't go through all of them in detail because the list is long, but we are working our way through those matches. We're prioritising the higher risk categories. Each match is being assessed to determine if an overpayment or an error has occurred, and any significant outcomes, such as any recoveries or internal procedure improvements, we will be reporting back to the next committee. It's important to note, though, that the presence of a match doesn't necessarily mean it's fraud on its own. Matches are indicators of further investigation, and our participation in the exercise strengthens our financial controls and contributes to our overall governance assurance. And I'll take any questions on this exercise.
Councillor Blackensall.
Thank you, and thank you for the verbal update. So one of the things I would note in the minutes was that there was a possibility of a written summary to come forward at some point in the future. That was in the minutes, and it's good to hear that we're making some progress. It would be very nice to have some sign of that progress in writing, and so we could discuss potential cases that may have been concerned for the authority.
Of course, that's the plan. Once we work the way through all the matches, we will bring that back to next committee.
Make sure it's added to the work plan for 15th of September.
So there's a time frame will be next month, next couple of months.
Well,
or how long?
we'll add it to the meeting for 15th of September.
All right.
Just to bring up a report back.
Because yes, I would be quite interested to see that report in writing as opposed to just having a verbal update, because I think it's something really important for the audit committee to have a view over. Thank you. Any more questions about the fraud initiative? No, so I take it we'll go on to that one. And now we'll move on to item 15, the Treasury Management Outturn Report 24-25. And Steve's also going to present that one.
I am. Thank you, Chair. So this is in line with the SITFA's Treasury Management Code. It's an annual report that reviews the MCA's treasury performance for the year ending March 2025. The key points then, the investment balance has increased by £81 million from March 24 to 462 million. Our investment income in full for the year was 22.6 million. 22.1 million relates to the mayoral combined authority, which is a favourable variance to budget of 10.3 million. The average investment return last year was 4.9%, and this aligns with the Sterling Overnight Index average benchmark. The focus remained last year on security and liquidity before yield. Our funds are diversified across banks, local authorities and money market funds. We do still have £47 million invested in strategic long-term pooled funds. A £5 million Treasury reserve is retained to cover the capital loss currently on these pooled funds. And due to the previous uncertainty around the statutory override, this override has now been extended until 2029 for any investments already in place before the 1st of April 2024. Our performance against some of our key indicators, these monitor our exposure to Treasury investment risk. All the indicators are within target apart from the interest rate risk. This has exceeded the limit due to the overall high investment balances we're currently holding and the fact that most of our local authority maturities are within the next 6 months. All our current investments align with the ESG principles and the UN principles of responsible investment, and we don't have or have not had any external borrowing during 24-25 due to cash flow purposes. And I'll take any questions, please.
Councillor Harker.
Thank you, Chair. A comment and a question, if you don't mind, Steve. As you know, I've previously raised concerns about the authority investing in the pooled funds, and it's disappointing to see that those funds are currently showing a loss of 5.1 million. I'm of the opinion that the authority should only invest in risk-free instruments. And I only hope that this loss can be recovered before it's necessary to recognise it in the income and expenditure account. Although I understand that the statutory override for that has been extended. I guess it's a case of having to wait until the value of these funds recover before being able to do anything. But if they do recover, then will we liquidate them and invest in other instruments?
That's the plan, yeah. The advice from our Treasury advisors, Arlen Close, is obviously to hold them, given the huge capital loss we're sitting on. Two of the funds are multi-assets, so these are spread across all different avenues. We would expect those values to increase as the base rate starts to fall. But the longer term plan, once they have recovered, would be to offload them, yes.
Sorry, Chair, I do have one other question, if that's okay, on the Treasury report. I see that we've got 351 million placed with government, including local authorities. Is that mainly local authorities? And what's the process for placing that? Is it done through a broker?
Yes, it is all local authorities. We don't lend to other combined authorities. It is a process. We use 4 different brokers. We also use Arlen Close. They have a platform where we can see what other local authorities are asking to borrow with the exchange rate, with the rates, etc. And then we take a view via the dialogue with the brokers to maximise the rate we are offered.
And I presume that the brokerage fee is paid by the borrower rather than the lender. So we
yes, it's paid by the borrower.
So we wouldn't incur any costs. But I guess the overall process is it the government issues debt on the market via gilts. So the government would issue gilts. They then pass the funds to this authority. This authority then lends it to another level of government, and in doing so, a middleman takes the brokerage fee.
That's exactly what's happening. Yes, yeah. We are receiving our grants in advance. So whilst we're sitting on this cash, we are lending to other local authorities who require the cash flow.
Yeah. It's overall the process doesn't seem like an efficient way of allocating public funds, but I appreciate that this authority is acting in a appropriate way in that sense.
Well, yes, and the rates are better if we lend it to other local authorities rather than putting it short term with banks.
Yeah, thanks, Steve.
I have one question that I'd like to raise. The £5 million that's been allotted to pay off the statutory override when the government calls it in. What's happening to that £5 million in the meantime, please?
In terms of the actual cash, or
where it's being invested and what return we might get out of it?
That would be part of what's being invested with other local authorities. Rates range from 4.25% up to just over 5% on our current portfolio.
Thank you. Any more questions?
Yes, Chair.
Oh, Councillor Superstar, sorry, I didn't see you at the end.
That's all right. Just wanted to check really about the status of the exit plan that's currently being discussed. Just to go back to what Dave was asking. What's the actual criteria for any of that to happen?
Well, we monitor the pooled funds on a monthly basis. as part of our Treasury dashboard, which we meet and discuss. We regularly have updates with our Treasury advisors. Through dialogue with them, that's when we would make the decision on if we would sell any of our current portfolio.
Is that a likely possibility?
We're not expecting them to increase in value in the short term, but it's a likely possibility next year.
Next. Okay. My other question to yourself is in terms of our investments to climate and ecological kind of strategy, particularly in alignment with local authority. What measures is being taken around that?
Again, it's with dialogue through our Treasury advisors. I'm an accountant, I don't work in the markets, so we rely on their advice really. We expect any investment we make to other local authorities to have their own robust ESG policies.
Okay. I mean, I ask this because it is a priority. So to actually see what level of investment is being put towards that priority will then kind of show the financial priority. Yeah. Is there any further insight that will come soon, just to kind of highlight where the priority sits financially?
We have internally within the department been looking at a fuller ESG policy around our investments. We just use the minimum requirement at the moment as advised by SIPFA. We follow banks and organisations that have signed up to the UN Principles of Responsible Investment, but we haven't explored it any further at the moment.
Thank you, Steve. You used a TLA there, ESG. What was that in relation to?
Well, that's environmental, social governance for investments. Sorry.
Thank you very much for clarifying that. Any more questions? So I'd like to move on to say that we've noted that. And now we'd like to move on to the item 16, the quarterly corporate risk register review. Abby Evans will be presenting that, please.
Sorry.
Good morning, members, and thank you, Chair. Can you all hear me? Yeah. So this report is seeking comment on our quarterly corporate risk register. The MCA is committed to delivering its strategic objectives while having a keen awareness of the threats that might impede or impact our planned outcomes. So a clear focus on the management of risk is really important. All the risks that have been identified in this report have been assessed and mitigated using our standardised approach. That is set out in our corporate risk framework, which was last updated through this audit committee in the spring. So the latest corporate risk register is at Appendix 1. The report details 8 high scoring risks, and all the risk descriptions, scoring and mitigations have been brought up to date. The most substantive changes to the individual risks since the register was last reported in March are detailed in section 12 to 15 of the report. And I was going to pick up on a few key changes. So there is one brand new risk, that is poor quality performance and project management data, reference CRR 17. This risk score reflects the fact that most of the mitigations are in progress or planned rather than in place. So if we achieve all the planned mitigations, the risk rating will lower significantly, and the successful delivery of our organisational improvement plan work streams will help to improve quality and performance and project data. There is one risk currently rated as significant. It remains significant since last quarter at the highest score of 25. This is risk CRR 14, that there is a significant risk that the MCA and unitary authorities cannot deliver all of the CRSTS programme funding model and projects. CRR 17, the new one, poor quality performance and project management data, is the second highest rating at 20. That's a correction, 12B of the report. 3 risks have closed, so we're seeing a smaller risk register this quarter. The closures since last reported are CRR 12, which was failure to make progress against the points raised by the best value notice. That has closed. We are no longer under BVN. Notice has lapsed in March, so that has been removed since the Ministry of Housing, Communities and Local Government have written to us, confirmed it will not be reissued. CRR 11 is closed, which is around the limited internal workforce planning and succession planning for programme, project and PMO staff, our project management office across the MCA and partner organisations. And this is because a broader workforce planning risk is now recognised and managed through an existing risk, which is CRR 10. And the transport specific risks have been de-escalated and being controlled at a lower directorate level now. And the final closure was CRR 15, which was around the MCA not being geared up to adapt to our operations and priorities in response to the new mayor coming in. And following on from the successful induction of the new mayor, we have removed that one, but will obviously our ability to and capacity to respond to political steers and requests will be continue to be monitored and assessed as part of our business as usual activities. One reduction in a risk trend quite significantly is the CRR 5, the likelihood or severity of potential negative outcomes has dropped in the reduction of our real value of funding. So that inherent score reduced from 20 to 12 and a number of mitigating factors have lessened that risk. So we've seen greater than expected mayoral capacity funding this year. We have come out of that best value notice, which opens up opportunities for greater and more flexible funding through the integrated settlement. And we now have a balanced and affordable medium-term financial strategy in place. Risk CRR 8, the MCA's financial resources, actions and plans do not fully address the climate and ecological emergencies. This risk has been updated and a deeper dive on corporate risks in the environment areas on the forward plan for Audit Committee. So the Environment Directorate are busy analysing the credibility of their approach to climate and nature work and essentially considering that from three angles: financial, reputational and evidence of impact. So work is being completed on that. We'll report back to this committee in the autumn. Finally, looking forward, we've already started work on our next framework refresh and we are planning an informal briefing on risk developments for Audit Committee in the autumn. We are testing our risk appetite statements we established last summer with the Mayor and CLT and moving them towards being operational tools, developing controls and thresholds which make them more actionable to help with a stronger alignment between business decisions, our strategy and key performance indicators. So as we evolve and become a more mature performance organisation, we will continue to embed the risk management outcomes and process into organisational activity and decision making. Another area we're hoping to share with you is developing our upside risks and managing potential positive outcomes or opportunities that could arise from uncertainties like being a strategic authority and the integrated settlement. So there is a shift in focus from threats to opportunities, and we hope to be able to share with you, provide more assurance that we have the appropriate and robust arrangements in place to manage risk and the new challenges that the MCA faces as we diversify and evolve. So that's the synopsis that I wanted to share with you today. I'm happy to receive any comments and questions.
Thank you, Abby, for that report. Councillor Bleckensop, you have a question.
Thank you, and thank you for that report. It's good to hear that we've gotten some progress on risk. Not so great to hear on the data management, although it's a very robust list of mitigations, which is really good to see. I just wanted to ask a few questions about the mitigations. So M7 KPI data management tool, key performance indicator, since we mentioned acronyms, has been procured and is being rolled out. What tool is that and how is it chosen, if I'm allowed to ask?
The performance indicators, sorry. Or
the data management tool. What have we procured? Did we choose?
So it's currently under procurement through the organisational improvement plan. I think there's an immediate update. So I know it was live and the plan was to get a project tracker in place to be able to readily access the data. So it is live and current, but I'm not sure what the latest procurement one is. The plan that would be around this time, so I think is imminent. We'll be able to give you a more detailed report on that.
Okay, I would love to have an update on that in the near future. M10, we're also having a project tracker being procured to improve project data. That's very welcome news. What is less welcome is the implication we didn't have one already. So that's a bit worrying. And I suppose I'm wondering how long have we been without, we don't have a project tracker in place at the moment. How long has that been the case? And how, therefore, were we keeping track of things?
So I don't think it's correct that we don't have a project tracker in place, because we are tracking projects, but we might not be doing that in the best, most efficient fashion. So there is a software platform that is going to be help us to make that more efficient. So at the moment, it is based on many Excel spreadsheets, and there are pockets of activities with CRM systems, but we're not utilising the same one throughout the whole organisation. So the organisational improvement plan is looking at mapping what we've currently got, because we obviously do map our projects, but there is an improvement to be had with the new system, the project tracker, that should be embedded over the next few months.
Yes, it would be really good to see that all joined up, because I think a lot of Excel spreadsheets is not a very efficient or desirable way to go about doing things, at the risk of stating the obvious. Last one for the M4, increasing use of Power BI for reporting. That's very good to hear. It's a very useful tool. And I note that against M14, review of data literacy and skills across the business. Again, at the risk of stating the obvious, slightly stupid question, we will have plans in place to make sure that people are trained how to use the new software if there is a lack in that data literacy, as I worry there might be. Yeah, absolutely. There is a plan. So our performance manager, Julia Frost, is overseeing that as well. We've got data colleagues specialising in the rollout and ensuring that staff are updated, and it will continue to be able to use a new project tracker, but also to make use of other facilities like Power BI. Good, thank you. That's very reassuring. That's all.
Just say that one of the points that you asked to be brought forward on the forward plan is performance management. So all your questions sort of fall in that domain. So we will definitely add that to the forward plan and bring back a more thorough update.
Councillor Harker.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, thank you for the presentation. You mentioned that CRR12 has been closed. That, of course, related to the best value notice and the transformation programme. I understand that the items that were still open on the transformation programme have been transferred to a internal organisation improvement programme. So I wonder if that should actually appear on the register so that we can remain cited on those open items.
Yeah, so there is a lag in reporting with the corporate risk register. So I'm currently analysing the risk register that will be reported to you in September. And at the very top of that, because the OIP programme is really just initialised, they're collecting all the risks across all of the different work streams of the organisational improvement plan. So what you'll see is those that reach our threshold that should feed up to the corporate risk register. You'll see them if they hit that threshold come through, and I imagine that you will see one around the organisational improvement plan and any specific specific work streams that are of a higher level risk for you to oversee as well.
Thank you.
Christine.
Thanks, Chair. My question also relates to the organisational improvement plan. So we had a discussion when we were talking about internal audit about the schemes of delegation, and it's mentioned as one of the mitigations in CRR 14. So does that mean the schemes of delegation have been updated? I'm assuming that relates to the delegation of authority in terms of decision making. Have they are in place? They have been updated?
As I'm not the risk owner, I didn't write mitigation, so I might need to double check. I mean, my assumption would be so, but rather than assume, we can double check and come back to you.
So I think with that, it's just that the specific scheme of delegation for CRSDS programme has been changed since last time around. So it now goes to CEOs, I believe.
And I have a question. It's related to CRR 14. I'm having some issues to actually understand what the scope of this risk. Obviously, it's a big risk, and there are lots of different mitigations in place. But what I would like is a steer in the risk about which is the most risky. So we have 7 different themes: the CRSTS accelerator workstream, the resources workstream, and various others. I don't really have a handle about which is the most risky. Can we have a steer on that, please?
So we have the officer in the room who can talk to talk to this one if that's okay. So Chris Salmon.
I had spotted Chris in the back.
Yeah, it's finding a spot, isn't it?
Good afternoon, Chair. Good afternoon, Audit Committee. For those who don't know, my name is Chris Salmon, Head of Transport Programmes here at the Combined Authority. So to your question, Chair, is it that you're wanting to understand what's the biggest risk within CRR 14? Or
Yes, basically, because we have many different streams, all of which are classified as 5 and 5. So it would be good to know what the which is the most likely to happen and how we can actually mitigate against it.
Fair enough, no, absolutely. So overall, the inherent risk of 5 and 5 is that there was a significant risk that the CRSTS programme being delivered by both the unitary authorities and the MCA is at risk of underspend. So then what we put in place, whether it's through the CRSTS acceleration workstream, new governance, updated reporting, additional resources, improve early contract engagement with the supply chain, various different looking at how impact of network happens, construction and phasing construction are all different methods by which we're trying to mitigate that overall risk. I think what we've identified over the last year is that just under a year ago, when the acceleration programme was starting, there was limited governance in place, and there's now a CRSTS board that's attended by executive directors, 151s and section 151s and section 73. There has been progress made on a lot of the delivery. So now 2/3 of the funding has been allocated and awarded, and the rest is due to come through business cases over the rest of this year. But it's understandable, as I think perhaps has been covered in previous conversations with Audit, that in a big construction program, there are always challenges to delivery at a project by project level. And so, given that it is such a significant program, it is on the internal audit plan. It's been something that we regularly update at this committee, and there is progress towards a rebaselining exercise at the October committee to ensure there's a real focus on delivery of schemes that can be completed within the funding window. And we are also lobbying with DfT at the moment to understand the ability to that transition between CRSTS and the Transport for City regions, which will be the funding from March 27, to understand that transition approach and lobbying around a blended approach between the two.
Thank you for that. That's reassuring. Councillor Burton.
I just go back to page 146, CRR 10, and the ability to attract and retain high quality talent. My question relates to making sure we've got the right process in terms of each of the actions to mitigate this risk in the right order. So I look down here, and obviously one of the risks associated with director level and employability up to fill those posts. And M4 talks about 1 executive director role and 3 director roles being successfully recruited in April 25, and 1 outstanding role of Director of Communications to be advertised. Given the significant problems we've had in the past in terms of severance pay and exits from these high-level roles, and I see the Director of Communications is a role being advertised between 102,000 and 138,000. I just want to make sure that we are confident and happy that the scope of those roles at director level, given the significant financial implications they have been thought through and are the right ones, particularly when we look at later on in M8, where we talk about we are working through job grading to ensure we understand the skills and talent required to help the organisation deliver its objectives. So I'm just wanting to make sure we're confident that, for instance, the director role profiles and the reporting structures are aligned properly with the needs of the organisation, and that we're not simply putting in direct level roles and they create a pyramid below them. Actually, we look at what are the gaps, what are the holes, what do we need them to do, and actually, do we need a director of communications, or actually could that be a widened role for one of the previously created roles that we looked at, to make sure that the pyramid is correct and to ensure that the pyramid is as small as possible, so that we fulfill the obligations without unnecessarily having a large amount of director level roles, which may not necessarily be the right structure.
73 officers.
I would, Kay, if you're comfortable, we've got the head of HR in the room. Are you okay to talk to that one, please? Some of it, yeah.
Yeah. That's all right. I'm speeding over.
Sorry,
That's
should be
all right.
behind. Thank you so much. Hi, thank you. Hi, nice to see you all. I'm Kay Howick, Head of HR and OD. I can break that down, and obviously some of those questions I won't necessarily be able to answer, but I think from a director level and looking at the roles, they do get scoped out fully and evaluated as director level roles. I note you said that there's some work beneath that we've referenced around job and pay scales. Was that correct? Sorry, I'm just going to have to break that down slightly in terms of the questions that you asked.
I think the bit which you're referring to is M8 in the papers, which says we are working through job grading to ensure we understand the skills and talent required. So I think it's not just a grading issue, it's obviously about the skills and talent to identify to presumably align with the organisational requirements.
Absolutely, and some of that is obviously wider cross-organisation, but as you say, at director level, that does get scoped out and discussed, obviously conversations with CEO as well to identify those roles, which I guess is why there's only some of that I'll be able to answer, but those roles are scoped and challenged and discussed, some of which are replacing. So the executive director for transport, there is a vacancy there, and there is a need for the director roles that sit within, and that was challenged quite heavily and goes to EAC as well for approval for all of those roles. I'm not sure I've quite answered your question.
Chair, if I may, just to help, in terms of appointments and the creation of those roles, they have to go through the Employment and Appointments Committee, and the leaders of each of the unitary authorities sit on that committee as well. So there is a high-level analysis, and the appointments are made via that committee as well.
Thank you. Any more questions? Councillor Tibshala?
Thanks, Chair. I guess maybe this is not necessarily a risk that's here, but it should be a risk that's here because it impacts the wider region. And in most conversations, people are quite worried about what is the brand WECA and how is that necessarily quite competitive in bringing resources. With all these risks that are based on projects, and obviously transport projects have got a huge impact on all of our residents, project management, retainment, it is a brand issue. And I'd like to see in the risk register where we put the brand in terms of public perception, public feedback, public expectation, because all of these have that knock-on impact. And, this staffing and the lack of kind of this one management board across all of our projects, I wonder what's the current impact towards the perception of WECA, or for those that don't maybe recognize the impact as coming from WECA, how much then does that impact influences local authorities, with people then thinking it's the local authorities versus where the source is coming from? And there lies an issue around communication. Where does the responsibility sit to communicate that? Because then, the punches from the public could be coming to the different responsibility could be coming to the people that are not necessarily responsible. So how are we mitigating, or how are we measuring that risk of public perception with all these schemes? Thanks.
Absolutely, very interesting, and it's worth saying that obviously the risks that you see, top level risks, there are many risk registers that sit underneath these for 9 directorate registers in total. And so this risk in terms of perception and communications and branding is captured on a risk register, but probably hasn't been deemed high enough threshold. It's usually at 15 when it starts to turn red, that you'll see it escalated where it needs oversight by the corporate leadership team and by audit committee. So I think we are aware that there's work to do in terms of the brand of WECA and the Mayoral Combined Authority. I think it's seen as an issue, as in it's a live thing that we're dealing with rather than the potential for disruption that happens as a risk. But it's certainly on the radar for the Combined Authority.
Yeah, I think that's quite an important one for all the joint up local authorities. What does this mean for them? How much does that impact their local authorities if the communication is not necessarily very clear and the responsibility is not really held by WECA in terms of all the transport scheme? My question more to you though was in relation to the finance report is, do you feel that there's enough sufficiency, financial resources to really back up CRR8 in terms of the green infrastructure projects, decarbonisation projects, so that if it is a priority, it's got the financial resources to make sure that it's delivering on that? And is the financial element of it a risk within the delivery? Thanks.
So it's a very valid point, and I'm not the risk owner, so I'm not going to comment, only because the analysis is happening, and it's certainly happening from a financial perspective at the moment by the environment team. And the plan is that that particular risk, CRR8, will be brought back to you in the autumn, so you'll get an in-focus view on the financial risk and whether there is. It's a difficult one because it's a macro risk, isn't it? There's the influence and the government. There's only so much within our power finance that we can control. So the director, Roger Hoare, is currently looking at that with his team in detail at the financial risk and what we can do and what was in our power to control and reduce that risk. So rather than preempt what he is going to say, it's a watch this space because that is coming back to audit committee soon.
Sorry, Chair. I guess that probably highlights something that would be quite important to see within the risk register is the financial element of it. So it really just joins up this risk register with the financial elements. Is it a financial risk? Is it not a financial risk? Is it an investment risk? So that you can just see it here.
So they are categorized by 7 different categories, but
Okay.
sometimes it's quite hard, isn't it? It's not a one fits all. So it's where it's best placed. And some are very clearly financial, but with the environmental one, it's more than just financial. So it's been harder to categorize. And that's why we're going with 3 different angles in terms of perception, that which will come back to you in the autumn.
Thank you. Oh, Councillor Williams.
Thank you, Chair. Apologies. Hopefully these were given at the start of the meeting for being late. I had a planned visit to the dentist, which turned out to be longer and more expensive than I anticipated. I'm here now for some more pain. CRR5 refers to the value of the investment pot and revenue pot, 15 million each per annum, which was set way back in 2017 and hasn't changed since. It says under the mitigations that there could be engagement with the government about at least an inflationary uplift, but I would have thought the major opportunity to get the value of that annual discretionary pot changed was changing the footprint of the combined authority itself. It seems that all the obstacles to admitting North Somerset are now gone, unless someone's going to tell me different, and maybe the authority will get bigger with Gloucestershire as well, because the NHS 10-year plan says that combined authorities and integrated care boards shall be coterminous, and Gloucestershire is now joining the Bristol, North Somerset and South Gloucestershire ICB. I know the Chief Executive isn't here, but I wonder whether somebody else from the senior leadership on the officer side could appraise us about how those discussions are going.
those discussions are ongoing. So our Director of Policy is probably the best place to give an update. She's not here today, but we can arrange for an update to be provided in more detail. I think the intention is for a paper to go to autumn on the North Somerset arrangements moving forward. Main committee, that is.
Chair, it is worth saying that obviously the relationship between ourselves and North Somerset have been improved considerably. So to the extent that obviously the joint committee and the full committee meet together now as a single entity rather than separately as previously, and both are chaired by the mayor or the deputy mayor, depending on who's available for those meetings. So I think as a first step, that's been something positive.
Thank you. And just having a conversation with Solange, and we're trying to add something about the MCA growing and the governance issues that would raise into the work plan. So I'd like to move that we've examined the risk register and to go on to the next item on the agenda, which is the cyber resilience update. Members should note that the National Cybersecurity Centre is reporting there are estimated 19,000 ransomware attacks on UK businesses in the last year. And can we please scope our questions so that we don't have to go into exempt session about cyber resilience, please? And Bob O'Brien will be presenting this report.
Thank you, Chair. I'm Bob O'Brien, Head of Digital Data and Operations at the Combined Authority. The paper before you asks Audit Committee to note the progress and future plans with respect to cyber resilience. It outlines how the authority has strengthened its cyber resilience over the past year across infrastructure policy and awareness. Our position is externally validated via the Public Sector Networks certification, which is renewed annually, internal audit, and our work with MHCLG to adopt the cyber assessment framework. And we're assessed as cyber assessment framework ready this year, and we'll continue to work with MHCLG to align with that industry standard framework. Thank you.
Any questions about cyber resilience?
Thanks. Two questions. One is there are references in the paper to the transition to the new ICT services. I was just curious as to what the new services were. And then secondly, with a number of the recent sort of published, well-publicized cyber events that have happened, the impacts have been compounded by the storing in some organizations of things like personal data, for example, which didn't need to be stored anymore, right? And there wasn't any reference to sort of personal data here. I was wondering, so given that the authority has been around for just over the 7 years now, what processes and procedures that we have in place to ensure that we are not keeping information that shouldn't be, that we don't need to be keeping and therefore couldn't lose. That makes sense?
It does, thank you. And so the first part of the question about new IT services that are referenced, that's what came to the full committee in January 2025, and it's about a continued relationship with our current arrangements with North Somerset Council. But within those arrangements, there's a change of how the IT services are provided and an opportunity with respect to this topic today to make some further enhancements to cyber resilience, in addition to what controls and measures are already in place that are contained within the report. And the second part of your question is about continued, so within the scope of those works, to ensure that our information security measures are appropriate and fit for purpose, and our policies are reviewed in line with those new arrangements. So that's part of the work, and a continued close working with information governance team, which at the Combined Authority, to ensure that that's the case. And one of the items on the referred to in the report here today was about the policy review on information security policies that One West supports us with, and reference to a refresh and update of those on transition to the new services.
Thank you, Bob. Any more questions? I think we can now move on then, please. Thank you very much, Bob.
Thank you.
The next item is item 18, which is the Health and Safety Improvement Plan. And Nicola Rose will be presenting that, please.
Thank you, Chair. I'm Nicola Rose. I'm the Head of Health and Safety here at the Combined Authority, and I'm here to report progress against the Health and Safety Improvement Plan, which we last updated in December last year. The Improvement Plan was agreed in September 2023, and as of the 31st of March 2025, apologies, all 16 actions have been completed and closed. And I refer you to the appendix to the health and safety report for the details included in the Improvement Plan Action Tracker. I also invite you to look at the pages 2 and 3 of the health and safety report, which offer noteworthy health and safety achievements across the directorates and all of the activities that we carry out here at the Combined Authority. It's important to remain focused. We've now started a shift towards monitoring, and that's including sample health and safety auditing. And that's to ensure the improvements that we've made are being effectively implemented and embedded. And a key focus for us is to maintain our reasonable assurance status that we achieved with our internal audit partners last year, before we then move towards achieving substantial assurance next year, which is our aim. So happy to take any questions on
that. Thank you, Nicola. Do we have any questions? Christine?
Thank you for this. There's a few references to the training that's been put on offer and 10 extra sessions. What's the take-up been like, and have you gotten all staff trained now?
Yes, so we've had around an 82% take-up on that, which I think is really good considering health and safety is the topic that it is. So getting people to come to health and safety training is not always easy. So really happy with that. But in addition to that, we have updated the statutory and mandatory training that all staff have to do when they join. But in addition to that, we've actually put that out to all staff as well as new starters. So it's been a really wide campaign. And we also ran a session for the senior leadership team and heads of service on their responsibilities for health and safety, because it's everybody's responsibility at every level, led by CEO down to everybody that works here.
Any more questions? Because I got a couple. Can I ask if the chair of the Combined Authority has completed a health and safety training, please?
He certainly has, and he actually gave a speech at the end of the training. And from September, the CEO will be chairing our health and safety consultative forum, which has representatives from.
You said he. I'm expecting it to be she.
Sorry, So I thought you were referring to our Chief Executive Officer.
I'm referring to the Mayor.
Oh, the Mayor. No. And this is a suggestion that has been mooted that we actually invite all elected members to a session, because as you all know, you have considerable influence over health and safety and the direction that health and safety takes across combined authority. So we would very much like to put on a session for all elected members, including the Mayor, if you would be happy to come to such a session.
I would welcome something, yes. Sam. And looking at the rest of the membership, are they keen? Excellent.
I will arrange accordingly.
Yes, please. Couple of other quick questions. What is Davies House and why does it need special attention on page 166? We've already mentioned Davies House as an asset.
Yeah, so Davies House is a much smaller building than the one we have here, but they do carry out activities like they update the timetables at bus stops. They stop roadside, so although it's a small operation, they do have some significant risks, and we've been working with them to incorporate in the wider corporate health and safety and also facilities management side of things, to make sure that they are up to the same standards that we've been working towards here at Redcliffe Street. And we've made very significant progress there. There's still a bit of work to do. As I said, we need to maintain real focus. And now that we've got all of the 16 actions from the improvement plan out of the way and done and dusted, that will be our focus, to maintain reasonable assurance, work on Davies House, and then move towards substantial assurance across this building and Davies House as well.
That's good to know. So Davies House is a completely different operating environment to this building.
Yes, in as much as they do have some machinery and they operate vehicles from there, and they have some casual labour there. So a little bit of a different dynamic, but similar, yeah.
One final question. The table on top of page 168 listing the budgeted roles.
Yeah.
Is that the full establishment? Because it does seem to be rather management heavy.
Yes, it's less management heavy than it was. We've gone from 4 posts to 2.8 or 2.86 to be exact. And there was originally a head of service, and then another similar head of service, then a manager, and then there was an advisor and a vacant role for an officer role. So we looked at that, and there's now the head of service, which is my role. Then we have a manager, but that has been changed to manager for mainly for projects in infrastructure. As we're moving towards delivery phase, rather than the pre-construction phase of our projects, it's really important to have somebody that's of a sufficient level to understand all of the construction design management regulations 2015 implications. We've been working with the unitary authorities and Network Rail on that as well. And so it is important that that is a fairly senior role. And apart from that, we just have a 0.86 coordinator, and that's all we have now. So we've significantly reduced that.
Thank you for that clarification. And I think that's the end of questions to Nicola, unless anybody else has more.
Okay.
Thank you, Nicola. So I'd like to move on to item 19, the last substantive item. Grant Thornton informing the audit risk assessment for the West of England Combined Authority. And Solange and James will be speaking to that one.
Okay, so each year Grant Thornton require management to complete a series of questions on fraud, laws, regulations, going concern, related parties, accounting estimates, and general inquiries of management to inform their annual audit risk assessment. So these responses are shown in detail in Appendix 1. So just to let you know, there's been no substantial changes in a year for 24-25 when compared to the previous year. The Audit Committee, as those charged with governance, are requested to confirm and approve that the management response to the risk assessment is a true reflection of the authority's management processes based on their understanding.
Okay, any questions to that? No? Thank you very much, Solange. So Now we'd like to move on to item 20, it's points to refer to the main committee. Bear in mind that this committee will be happening in September. Was it? Yes, in September. Hopefully it will be before the next.
Yeah, that's correct.
There'll be another audit meeting before the main committee, so we can say questions then. But if there's anything you'd like to note out of this meeting that you want me to raise with the main committee, please raise them now. Councillor Bleckenshop.
If it's not already on the agenda in that respect, I guess the health and safety may be one to bring up there, but that's not a huge issue.
Noted, yes. Okay, well, thank you very much. Item 21, if you want to give me any feedback about this meeting, me and Toby would be more than welcome to accept feedback on this, and we will work to incorporate your feedback into this meeting. I'd also like to remind members that we have an opportunity to speak confidentially with the authority's external auditors following this meeting if they so wish. I'd like to remind us that the next meeting of the Audit Committee is on the 15th of September here, and Monday the 8th of December 2025, and Monday, March the 2nd of 2026. Sounds a long way away, doesn't it? And thank you very much for attending. I call this meeting to a close. Thank you.